the last Owlbutcast before we go on our winter break. Yes, we're going to hibernate. You've been watching that video too often. But we are going to hibernate for winter. This will be the last one. We'll be back again on January the 9th. So that's when Owlbutcast will restart. And this week we're going to talk about strikes. If you've been listening to the news, you've probably heard that the rail workers have been on strike, postal workers have been on strike, nurses are going to be striking this month, teachers or one teaching union has voted to strike. Why is it all happening? What is it all about? That's what we're going to try and tell you. Now, usually a strike is about pay. People want more pay. And the employers say they can't afford it. But it can also be about conditions. For example, the rail workers' strike, or negotiations anyway, have said, the government has said, you must agree to modernise. And sometimes modernising things can mean that jobs are lost. I'm going to go way back now to when I was a little kid. When I was a child, 3 or 4 years old, there was a street light outside our house. Yes, we did have houses, not huts, thank you. And every night a man would come round and light that street light. Yes. And every morning he would come back and put it out again. Now, modernisation came along and a computer somewhere now notes when it's dark, notes when it's light, and switches all the lights on and off. That means everybody who was doing the job of lighting the lamps lost their job. The same thing is also true, way back again, but with regard to the railways. I used to go to school and I used to have to catch a tube train. On that tube train there was a guard. At the stations he would step out of his little compartment right at the back of the train and either press a little button that went ding ding and the driver knew when he could go, or he would wave a green flag and the driver knew when he could go. Staying with that, I used to travel on buses. There was always a bus conductor. That bus conductor would walk up and down the bus collecting your tickets. You would give him money, he would have a little machine round his waist, press a few buttons and out would come your ticket. Go back to the trains again. When I used to catch a train there was a ticket office. I would have to go to that ticket office and give somebody some money and they would give me a ticket. I would then walk to the barrier and at the barrier there would be a man standing in a booth who would check my ticket. Same thing happened at the other end when I got off the train. So there were lots of jobs there. Now those jobs don't exist. It's all automatic. That means people lose their jobs. And that's the sort of thing that some people will be striking over. Now, let's look at what a strike actually is. I mean, quite simply, I could be working for Asda, Tesco's, Morrison's, Sainsbury's, Lidl, Aldi, other supermarkets are available, and I could say to them, look, I don't like these terms and conditions here, or I don't like my pay, I'm going on strike. Yes, you're absolutely right. Probably nobody would notice. So it's only when unions become involved that the strike can have a serious effect. And what a union is, it's if you want to join your union, there are various unions for all sorts of workers, and it is a collective. It is all of those people who are in the union, and they negotiate on your behalf. Now, in 1800, at the beginning of the 19th century, unions, any form of union, was made illegal. And in fact, if you go to our website and go to 1832, I think, or 1834, you will find a little case about some farm workers in a little village called Tolpuddle, who apparently were accused of swearing an oath of allegiance to a society. They called it a friendly society. That was deemed illegal. They were tried, they were found guilty, and they were sent to Australia as a punishment. Yeah, I don't think they went and sat on Bondi Beach, but yes, you could construe it as being a punishment. Actually, talking of Bondi Beach, very quick aside here, I was in Australia in June of 2003, and I was actually on Bondi Beach. I was actually sitting in a club they have there called the Iceberg Club, which is an open-air swimming pool, and they all go swimming through the winter when the temperatures are hotter than they're here in the summer. But anyway, I was talking to the secretary of the club, and I was interviewing him, and we looked outside, and he said, you know, winter's just started, 21 degrees and the water's 19 degrees. You sent us here as a punishment. He had a point. Anyway, let's go back to the unions. Unions were made legal in 1871. And there's actually another little story on our website for 1888, when some women, young women who worked for a company which you may have heard of, you may not, called Bryant and May. They make matches. These young women, actually, their conditions were so bad that they all walked out, refused to work. It's all on the website, tells you all about it, but it's perhaps one of the first cases of people walking out and withdrawing their labour. However, there are certain rules that must be obeyed if you want to strike or take industrial action. There's two forms of industrial action basically. One is you can go on strike, and the other one is you can take other action. Now, in my day, that I think used to be called work to rule, and basically it means you will only do what it says you do in your contract. You will not do overtime. Presumably, if you're on the phone to somebody and you're supposed to work till 9 to 5 and you're in the middle of a conversation and 5 o'clock comes up, you put the phone down and you go. So, there are two types of industrial action. To take industrial action, and as I said, me doing it on my own doesn't really have much effect, but for a union to take industrial action, they have to ballot, a postal ballot of all their members, and they have to get a majority verdict. What's the majority verdict? More people voting in favour of taking strike action than vote against. Now, there are certain other rules as well, but we won't worry about them, but the number of people is one of them. For example, if you've got a union of 3,000 people and only 5 people vote in the ballot and all 5 vote for strike, that doesn't constitute the fact that you are allowed then to call a strike. So, you have to have a ballot, and then the union can decide what action it is going to take. It doesn't have to walk out non-stop. They can actually say, as the nurses have said, we're going to strike for 1 day here and 1 day there. And if you're a trade union member, you don't have to do what the union has told you. You don't have to take part in industrial action. It's against the law for an employer to sack you. However, they probably won't pay you while you're on strike, because basically you're not doing any you're not doing your job. And they could argue that you've broken your contract, i.e. you had a contract to work for me and you're not now doing it. I don't think that happens very often, but legally it would be possible. So, the union have balloted their members. The members have said, yes, we're in favour of taking strike action or some similar action. The union then has to decide what it's going to do. And as I said, they can do 1 day strike, they can work to rule or take action before a strike or whatever it was called, and they will give notice to the employer that this is going to happen. Now, the only way you can be dismissed, sacked for taking industrial action, is if the ballot was illegal and if the union hasn't given the employer the correct notice, and a few other reasons alongside that. So basically, it happens, ballot taken, go on strike, tell the employers. But the question is, I think, why is this all happening? Why are people nowadays wanting to go on strike? And the answer to that is quite simply the economic situation that has been going on for the last 12, probably 14 years. Things have been very tough for everybody. There's always two sides in a dispute. Otherwise you're arguing with yourself. Or I'm arguing with you, yes, that's possible. No, it's not. Yeah. Oh, shut up. So yes, so one side will be the employer and the other side will be the employees, the people who are working for that employer. And whether you like it or not, each side probably has a very valid reason for putting their case forward. The employer will say, we don't have enough money. If it's the government, they certainly don't have enough money at the moment. They've had to spend it on the COVID pandemic. They're spending some on supporting Ukraine and a lot of other things, and prices are rising. So that means the employee will say, yes, but I haven't had a pay rise for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years or whatever, or I have had a pay rise, but the pay rise has been less than prices have been rising. So in fact, I have got less money. So they'll have this dispute, and the way it should be sorted is through negotiations. But it's not really often that happens, and that's why people resort to strike action. Just as a matter of interest, I spent 3 years of my teaching career teaching managers how to negotiate, and the ones I came across, I would have to say, didn't always get the hang of negotiation. Basically, if you're wanting a 10% pay rise, then you'll go in perhaps asking for 15%. Point out at this stage that I don't like any of this. It's a little bit like some countries around the world. I was in Thailand for 6 weeks once. I didn't like the way they behaved, because you go into a shop and you say, I'll pay 500 baht, which is their currency for that, and they'll say, no, 800, and you'll say, how about 600, and they'd say, no, 700, and eventually you'd agree on 650, and it's a complete waste of time. If they want 650, ask for it. That's my view. But in negotiations, one side will probably put their case a little strongly, the other side will put their case strongly, and somewhere they should be able to come to a happy agreement. But if they don't, that is when a strike takes place. That is when industrial action takes place. And as I say, most of it happening now that you're going to hear about, and as I said, one teaching union, I believe, has voted as a possible strike, so who knows what will happen. And I think, in fact, I'm right in saying, because it's slightly different rules there, teachers in Scotland have actually been on strike and schools had to close. And a strike can be 1 day, half a day, a week, occasional days. It will cause disruption. And the question is, how much disruption can the employer put up with? How much disruption can the people who are being disrupted, like if the trains go on strike, then you can't catch a train. So when do you, ordinary person, lose sympathy with the train drivers? If you're seriously ill and the nurses are on strike, there are certain rules that apply to nurses and other organisations in that they are going to continue emergency cover. So it's only operations that will be... I'll never get my knee done. I think he's possibly right. I've only been waiting 3 years. If I had wings, my knees would not be a problem. Yep, that's true. I think I haven't. Nope, you're right, I haven't. Okay. I've now forgotten what I was saying. Oh yes, so they do emergency cover, but things like non-emergency procedures will be delayed. How long will you, the public, put up with that till you start complaining about the nurses being on strike? That's the question, and that's what's all going on at the moment. It's a very difficult situation. It's happened before. We had it in 1970, I can't quite remember when. I think it was about 1977, 78. 78, there was something called the Winter of Discontent. Could be Winter of Discontent Part 2. I didn't know Shakespeare wrote that. I thought he only did Henry IV in Part 2. Was it Henry VI? No, Henry IV. But the Winter of Discontent could be coming around again because people are unhappy. They can't manage. They haven't got enough money. And there isn't, in certain cases, enough money to give them the rise that they're asking for. The question is then, what happens? And you get something, I think, which is called stalemate. Nobody can do anything. The strikes can't go on forever. Teachers know that, nurses know that, even postal workers know that. Because after a while, people will stop sending letters. They'll think, not many people probably do these days anyway, but they'll think, well, there's no point in that. So by the time the postal workers came back, if it was, say, a 2 or 3 month strike, there may be no work for them because nobody's writing any letters. Lots of things can happen. And, you know, think about it. Talk to people about it. Have a talk amongst yourselves. Try negotiating. Try having one group of pupils who want to have an hour for lunch and another group who say we should only have half an hour. Talk about it. Where do you draw the line? Where do you reach agreement? Do you say 3/4 of an hour then we'll agree, or do you say we'll have an hour on 2 days and half an hour on 3 days? How do you do it? Try some of that. Try some negotiations. Find a topic. See what you can do. Anyway, that's our little chat about strikes. I know that because I've now got a blank desk. Yes. We're going to go away and have our Christmas break. Hibernation, yes, we're going to go and have our hibernation. And we will be back on the 9th of January, as I said before. I think I'm repeating myself, but don't worry about it. I hope you have a fantastic Christmas, as best you can in this winter of discontent. Yep. And I hope that 2023, when it comes along, is a really good year for all of you. Try and make it so. Okay, we'll be back in 2023 and we'll see you then. Okay, bye. Bye. Which way are you waving? You were just showing off that you'd got wings so your knees were all right. Yes, okay. See ya.